The chamber was old, older than most living things in the galaxy. Its walls were carved from stone pulled out of a dead moon, and its ceiling stretched so high that clouds sometimes formed near the top. 12 seats curved around a central floor like the ribs of some enormous beast, and in each seat sat the representative of a species that had ruled the stars for thousands of years. This was the Galactic Hegemony Council, and they had gathered today to discuss a problem. The problem was humanity. Archon Vialthus stood at the head of the chamber, his crystalline bones catching the pale light and throwing small rainbows across the walls. He was Draelith tall, ancient, and so deeply certain of his own importance that the universe had never once given him a reason to question it. His voice hummed when he spoke, like a machine warming up, and every species in the room had learned long ago to listen when that hum began. 200 years, Vialthus said, and he let the words sit in the air like smoke. That is how long the humans have been among us. 200 years since they crawled out of their small yellow sun and touched the void for the first time. And in that time, that tiny, insignificant blink of time, they have spread to 93 systems. He paused. The number did its work. Murmurs passed between the seats. They have not conquered, Vialthus continued, his tone careful and sharp. Let me be clear about that. They have not taken a single world by force. They have done something far more dangerous. They have made themselves necessary. He touched a control on his podium, and the air above the central floor, filled with light, star maps appeared, showing trade routes and supply lines, and communication networks. And running through all of it, like veins in a body, were human systems. Human ships, human stations, human engineers keeping alien machines running, human doctors working in alien hospitals, human merchants feeding alien cities. They are everywhere, Vialthus said quietly. And we did not notice, until it was too late, to simply ask them to leave. War Marshal Toran leaned forward in his seat. He was Graxy broad, heavy, built like something designed to break through walls. His people were warriors, and had been warriors since before most council species had discovered fire. He looked at the star map, the way a predator looks at an open field. Then we do not ask, Toran said. His voice was like gravel rolling downhill. We tell. Several councillors murmured agreement. The Draelith delegate nodded. The Suran ambassador clicked her beak twice, which meant the same thing. Only one seat remained silent. Councillor Jet Mora sat still, their body flickering with the soft bioluminescent light of the Velkari hive mind. They were not one being but many thousands of tiny organisms linked together into a single thinking shape. They processed information differently than the others. They saw patterns, and the pattern they saw right now made them deeply uncomfortable. May I ask, Jet Mora said, their voice like wind through grass, what the humans have actually done wrong? The chamber went quiet. Vialthus turned slowly. They exist too loudly, he said. And they grow too fast. That is enough. Jet Mora wanted to say more, but the weight of 11 stares pushed them back into silence. Vialthus straightened. Before we vote, tradition demands that the accused be allowed to speak. Ambassador Vasquez, the floor is yours. A door opened at the base of the chamber, and a woman walked in. Lena Vasquez was not tall. She was not loud. She wore a simple dark suit, and her hair was pulled back tight. She carried no weapon, no display of technology, no grand symbols of her civilization. She walked to the center of the enormous chamber and stood there, a single human being surrounded by the oldest powers in the galaxy, and she did not look small. She looked ready. Thank you, Archon, she said. Her voice was steady and clear, with the kind of calm that comes not from peace but from preparation. I will be brief. She looked around the room, meeting each set of alien eyes, or what passed for eyes one by one. Humanity has been part of this galactic community for 200 years. In that time, we have started 0 wars. We have violated 0 treaties. We have occupied 0 worlds that were not empty when we arrived. We have fed your hungry, healed your sick, and kept your stations running when your own engineers could not. We have asked for nothing in return except the right to exist and to grow. She paused. You are about to vote to take that right away. I cannot stop you. I will not beg you. But I will tell you something, and I want every being in this chamber to hear it clearly. She took a breath. We have never started a war. I would encourage this council to maintain that record. Silence. Then Toran laughed. It was a deep, rumbling sound, and it broke the tension like a rock thrown through glass. Others joined in. The Suran clicked rapidly. Even Vielthos allowed himself a thin, cold smile. A human, threatening times them. A species younger than most buildings in this chamber, warning civilizations that had mapped the galaxy before Earth's first creature crawled out of the ocean. It was, they all agreed, very funny. Vasquez did not react to the laughter. She waited until it faded, and then she said, "One more thing. Then you should know the contingency is already active." No one understood what that meant. A few counselors exchanged glances. Toran waved a massive hand dismissively. Vielthus called the vote. 11 voices said yes. One Jet Mora said no. The declaration of conflict was issued against the United Terran Systems. It was official. The greatest powers in the galaxy had declared war on humanity. Vasquez nodded once, as if confirming something she had already known. She turned and walked toward the door. Her footsteps echoed in the enormous chamber, steady and unhurried. She did not look back. When the door closed behind her, a young Draelith aide approached Vielthus. The aide's crystalline bones were still clear, not yet clouded with age, and there was something in his expression that might have been worry. "Archon," the aide said quietly. "Should we be concerned about what she said? The contingency?" Vielthus looked down at him the way a mountain looks down at rain. "They are children," he said, "playing among gods. Their contingency is probably a sternly worded letter." The aide nodded and said nothing more. Far below, in the docking bay of the station, Lena Vasquez stepped onto her shuttle. She sat down, buckled her harness, and opened a secure channel to a location that did not officially exist. "This is Vasquez," she said. "The vote is done, 11-1. There was a pause. Then a voice replied calm, unsurprised, and absolutely certain. "Understood. Prometheus is live." Vasquez closed the channel and leaned back in her seat. She looked out the viewport at the massive station, the throne of ages, seat of galactic power for 4,000 years. She almost felt sorry for them. Almost. 72 hours passed after the vote, and the galaxy held its breath. War Marshal Toran stood on the command bridge of his flagship, the Time's Unbroken Claw, and watched the largest fleet assembled in 600 years take shape around him. 4,000 warships from 9 species filled the space ahead, their hulls gleaming under distant starlight like a river of iron and fire. Graxi dreadnoughts, Draelith cruisers with their crystal-laced armor, Suran interceptors that moved like flocks of angry birds. It was the kind of force that made planets surrender before a single shot was fired. Toran had spent his entire life training for a moment like this. He had fought border skirmishes, crushed pirate fleets, and led the pacification of 2 rebellious colony worlds. He was not afraid of war. He loved it the way some beings loved music. It was the thing that made him feel most alive. His plan was simple and overwhelming. A rapid strike through human border space, a direct push to their home system, and the capture of Earth within 3 weeks. The humans had a small defense fleet. Everyone knew this. Their military spending was a joke compared to the Council species. They spent their money on hospitals and trade ships and communication networks. Fools, Toran thought. Generous, soft, sentimental fools. "Status report," he said. His second officer, a younger Graxi with fresh scars on her face, looked up from her console. "All battle groups are in position, War Marshal. We are ready to enter human space on your command." Toran nodded and gave the order. The armada moved, and nothing happened. Not from the human side, anyway. No fleet rose to meet them. No emergency transmissions flooded the channels. No diplomats called begging for peace. No civilians screamed for help. The border systems that humanity had settled, systems that should have been full of activity, full of life, full of panic, were quiet. Not just quiet, empty. Toran's fleet entered the first system, a modest colony called Brightwater, and found it completely abandoned. The orbital station was dark. The surface settlements were powered down. The ships were gone. Even the satellites had been moved. It was as if someone had picked up an entire civilization and carried it away in the night. The only thing left was a signal. It played on every frequency, in every language the Council used, on a repeating loop. "You were warned." Toran stared at the message on his screen for a long time. Then he ordered his fleet to push forward. The second system was the same. Empty, dark, silent. The third system, too. By the fourth, His officers had stopped making jokes about human cowardice and started checking their sensors with nervous hands. "They are running," Toron said aloud, as much to convince himself as anyone else. "This is what retreat looks like." His second officer said nothing. She had studied humans at the military academy. She knew that humans did not run from fights. They ran towards them, but only after choosing the ground where the fight would happen. She kept that thought to herself. Far away, on the dark side of Earth's moon, a man sat in a room that existed on no official map. Admiral Ron Achebe was 63 years old, and he had spent 40 of those years preparing for the day that had just arrived. He had gray hair, steady hands, and the kind of patience that could outlast stone. The room around him was alive with light. Screens covered every wall, showing fleet positions, supply lines, communication networks, and 1,000 other pieces of data that painted a picture of the entire galaxy in real time. Achebe could see Toron's fleet moving through the empty border systems. He could see the Council's reserve forces gathering near their homeworlds. He could see the supply convoys, the troop transports, the communication relays. He could see everything, because humanity had made sure of it. "Lighthouse is fully operational," said a voice behind him. Dr. Ines Kowalski stepped forward, a tablet in her hand and dark circles under her eyes. She was the architect of Project Lighthouse, a network of communication relays hidden inside the commercial satellites that humanity had sold to alien worlds over the past century. Every species in the galaxy used human-built satellites because they were cheap, reliable, and well-designed. What no one knew was that each satellite contained a secondary system, dormant until activated, that could intercept and decode every transmission within range. Humanity had sold the galaxy its own surveillance network, and the galaxy had thanked them for the reasonable prices. "Every Council fleet is visible," Kowalski said, scrolling through data on her tablet. "Their encrypted channels are open to us. We are reading Toron's orders before his own officers receive them." Achebe nodded slowly. "And the withdrawals?" "Complete. All border colonies evacuated to fallback positions. Infrastructure is in standby mode. The automated defense systems are armed and waiting." She paused. "The Council has no idea what they are walking into." Achebe leaned back in his chair and stared at the largest screen, the one that showed the full galactic map with every human asset marked in blue. There were far more blue dots than anyone outside this room had ever suspected. 150 years. That was how long humanity had been preparing for this moment. Not because humans were warlike, they were not. Not because they wanted conflict, they did not. But because every human who had ever studied history knew one simple truth. Eventually, someone would come for them. The universe was full of older, bigger, stronger civilizations, and sooner or later, one of them would decide that humanity had grown too successful and needed to be cut down. So humanity prepared, quietly, patiently. While they built hospitals, they also built weapons platforms hidden in asteroid fields. While they sold satellites, they also built a galaxy-wide intelligence network. While they trained doctors and engineers, they also trained soldiers and strategists. They never displayed their strength because displaying strength was a warning, and warnings gave enemies time to prepare. Humans did not warn, humans waited, and now the wait was over. On the throne of ages, Counselor Jetmora sat alone in their quarters and read. They had spent the last 3 days studying everything they could find about human history, their wars, their cultures, their patterns of behavior. What they found terrified them. Humans had a concept they called total war. It meant that when pushed far enough, humans did not simply send armies to fight. They turned their entire civilization into a weapon. Factories became ammunition plants. Scientists became weapons designers. Artists became propagandists. Farmers became soldiers. Every part of human society could transform, almost overnight, into a single, unified machine with one purpose: survival at any cost. No council species had ever fought like that. War, for the elder races, was a controlled thing. Fleets met, battles were fought, treaties were signed. It was almost polite. There was nothing polite about what humans did when they were cornered. Jetmora sent a message to Vialthus. It was long, detailed, and urgent. It outlined what they had learned, and begged the Archon to reconsider, to open negotiations, to stop the fleet before it was too late. Vialthus read the message. He deleted it. In the fourth empty system, Toron received a report from his scouts. The fifth system ahead was also abandoned. No resistance. No humans anywhere. He smiled. They have given up. This war is already over. He ordered the fleet to increase speed. Behind them, unnoticed, a single human sensor drone watched the armada pass and sent a quiet pulse of data back to the moon. In his dark room, Achebe received the signal. He looked at the screen. He looked at the clock. He picked up a comm unit and spoke 6 words. Day 4 begins at their discretion. Then he set the comm down and folded his hands. The trap was ready. All that remained was for the enemy to walk a little further into it. The fifth system was called Harmon's Rest, named after the first human captain who had mapped it. It was a small system. 1 yellow star, 3 rocky planets, a belt of asteroids thick enough to hide a small moon. Nothing special. Nothing worth remembering. It would become the most remembered place in galactic history. Toron's armada entered the system at full speed. 4,000 warships stretched across space in a wide formation designed to sweep and conquer. Sensors showed the same thing they had shown for days: nothing. Empty space. Dead stations. Silence. Toron stood on his bridge and allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. 5 systems taken without a single shot fired. The humans were broken. The war would be over before the Council's supply ships even needed to refuel. Scan the asteroid belt, he ordered casually. Then prepare to move to the next system. His sensor officer ran the scan. The results came back normal. Rocks, dust, trace metals. Nothing alive. The scan was wrong. The asteroids woke up. There was no other way to describe it. One moment they were dead rocks floating in the void. And the next moment, hatches opened across hundreds of them. Hatches that had been hidden for years, sealed and painted to match the stone around them. And from inside those hatches came weapons. Railguns, missile batteries, energy projectors, autonomous drones by the thousands, pouring out of hollowed rocks like wasps from a nest. The first wave of fire hit Toron's vanguard before anyone could give an order. 36 ships were destroyed in the first 90 seconds. Not damaged, destroyed. Torn apart by weapons that had been aimed and calibrated long before the fleet had arrived. Toron roared a command, and his fleet began to return fire. But there was nothing to shoot at. The weapons platforms were small, scattered, and hidden among millions of asteroids. Hitting them was like trying to swat individual flies in a storm. And while his gunners searched for targets, the drones arrived fast, silent, and seemingly endless, crashing into ships like burning rain. Fall back, Toran ordered. All ships, reverse course to the jump point. The fleet turned. It was a difficult thing to do with 4,000 ships under fire, and the turn was messy, with vessels colliding and formations breaking apart. But Toron was experienced, and his officers were disciplined, and slowly the armada began to pull away from the killing field. They reached the jump point. They activated their faster-than-light drives. Nothing happened. The drives spun up, reached the threshold, and collapsed. Every ship, all at once, as if the laws of physics had suddenly changed in this small patch of space. Because, in a way, they had gravity well generators. Humanity had buried them in the outer edges of the system, deep beneath the surfaces of dead moons where no scanner would think to look. When activated, they created pockets of distorted space that made faster-than-light travel impossible. The fleet was trapped. They could not jump out. They could only move at normal speed, which meant days of travel to reach the edge of the effect days spent under constant attack from weapons that never ran out of ammunition and never needed to sleep. Toron lost 800 ships in the first 6 hours. Not in a battle. There was no battle. A battle required 2 sides fighting each other. This was something else. This was a slaughterhouse designed by patient hands and activated with perfect timing. He sent a desperate message to the Council. Send reinforcements. Send anything. We are dying here. The Council received his message. They prepared to respond. And then, their own problems began. It started small. On the Draelith homeworld, the planetary communication network experienced a minor technical failure. The network was human-designed, purchased 30 years ago, because human systems were the best and cheapest in the galaxy. The failure cascaded within hours, knocking out emergency services, transportation grids, and financial systems. On the Suron trade hub of Kethval, the atmospheric processors in 3 major cities stopped working. They were human-built. A maintenance request was sent to the human engineering firm that serviced them. The firm responded politely that, due to the current state of conflict, all service contracts with Council species were suspended. On 17 worlds across Council space, the same thing happened in different ways. Human logistics companies stopped delivering supplies. Human software entered maintenance mode and locked out alien operators. Human-run hospitals transferred their patients to local facilities and closed their doors. Human engineers packed their tools and left. None of it was sabotage. No systems were damaged or destroyed. Nothing was broken. The humans simply stopped working. They stopped helping. They picked up their things and went home. And the galaxy began to fall apart. It turned out that 2 centuries of quiet, generous, tireless work had made humanity the invisible foundation of galactic civilization. They were the engineers who kept the stations running, the programmers who maintained the networks, the doctors who treated the sick, the merchants who moved the food. Remove them, and the whole structure wobbled. Remove them all at once, and it began to collapse. Councillor Jet Mora stood before the emergency session of the council and tried to explain what was happening. Their bioluminescent body pulsed with agitation as they spoke. "We are not losing a war," Jet Mora said. "We are experiencing a withdrawal. The humans did not build weapons into our worlds. They built times themselves, times into our worlds. They made themselves the foundations of our systems, our economies, our daily lives. And now they have simply stepped away, and we are discovering that we cannot stand without them." Vieltha slammed his fist on his podium. "Then we force them back. We capture their people. We compel them to work." "They are already gone," Jet Mora interrupted, and the chamber fell silent because Jet Mora had never interrupted the Archon before. Every human in Council space left within the first 48 hours. They had evacuation plans ready, ships waiting, routes prepared. They knew this would happen. They have known for longer than most of us have been alive. The silence that followed was not the comfortable silence of power. It was the terrible silence of understanding. The emergency session dissolved into argument. 3 species began sending private messages to the human government, asking for separate peace. 2 others demanded that the full military reserves be sent to rescue Toron. The Graxi representative shouted that honor demanded they fight to the last ship. The Suron ambassador quietly calculated the cost of the supply chain collapse and realized her species was 14 days away from food shortages on 6 major worlds. In the middle of the chaos, a communication request arrived. It was from Admiral Achebe. It was addressed to the full council. Vielthas almost refused it. But curiosity, or perhaps the first small seed of fear, made him accept. Achebe's face appeared on the chamber's central display. He was calm. His uniform was neat. His hands were folded on a simple desk. Behind him, there was only a plain gray wall. He looked like a man delivering a routine report. "Members of the council," he said. "I am Admiral Roan Achebe of the Terran Defense Collective. I am contacting you to provide a status update." He glanced down at a tablet and began reading. His voice was flat and even, like a man reading a weather report. "Your combined fleet has lost approximately 1,200 vessels. Your economic losses across Council space are currently estimated at 6 trillion galactic standard credits and rising. 17 of your worlds are experiencing critical infrastructure failures. 3 of your member species have already contacted us, requesting separate negotiations." He looked up from the tablet and directly into the camera. "This is day 4 of your war against humanity. Everything I have just described was planned. Everything that comes next has also been planned." He paused for exactly 2 seconds. "Would you like to discuss day 5? Or would you prefer to discuss peace?" The transmission ended. In the council chamber, no one spoke for a very long time. Torin's desperate voice crackled over the military channel, begging for help from the killing field he could not escape. Vieltha stared at the blank screen where Achebe's face had been. For the first time in his long, long life, the Archon of the galactic hegemony did not know what to do. And somewhere in the dark, between the stars, the human fleet waited. It had not yet moved. It had not yet revealed itself. Day 4 was not even over. The second week of the war was when the council learned what fear tasted like. Three species, the Velkari, the Ulthanari, and the Menish, broke from the hegemony and contacted the Terran government directly. They asked for peace. They asked for their human engineers and doctors to come back. They offered trade agreements, formal apologies, and public statements condemning the war. Humanity accepted their requests with a politeness that somehow made it worse, because politeness from a position of total power is a very specific kind of terrifying. The hegemony, which had held together for 4,000 years through tradition, threat, and the simple fact that no one had ever been strong enough to challenge it, began to crack. Arguments erupted in the council chamber daily. The Suran ambassador accused the Draelith of starting a war they could not finish. The Graxi representative called the defecting species cowards and traitors. Vielthus sat at the head of it all, his crystalline bones dark with stress, and said less and less each day. And then Toran made his mistake. The war marshal had managed, through sheer determination and brutal sacrifice, to fight his way out of the trap at Harmon's Rest. He lost nearly half his fleet, doing it 2,000 ships, reduced to smoke and metal, but the survivors broke free and limped into open space. Toran was wounded, exhausted, and humiliated. He had never lost a battle before. He had never even imagined it was possible. Humiliation does strange things to proud creatures. It makes them desperate. It makes them cruel. Toran's surviving fleet passed near a small human colony world called New Kisumu. It was an agricultural planet. Farms, greenhouses, families. It had no military value. Its defense consisted of a single orbital station with enough weapons to discourage pirates and nothing more. Toran ordered the bombardment. His officers hesitated. Some protested. The colony was civilian. It was not a military target. Attacking it violated every rule of warfare that the council itself had written. Toran did not care. He needed a victory. He needed to hurt the humans the way they had hurt him. He needed them to feel pain so they would understand that the Graxi were not to be laughed at, were not to be trapped and toyed with like animals. The bombardment lasted 11 minutes. When it was over, the colony's main settlement was a crater. 8,000 people were dead. Farmers, teachers, children, an entire community erased, because one general could not accept that he had been beaten by a species he considered inferior. The news reached Earth within the hour. It reached Admiral Achebe 3 minutes after that. Achebe sat alone in his command room and read the casualty report. He read every name. It took him a long time. When he was finished, he closed the file and sat in silence for several minutes. Then he opened a channel to the Terran Defense Collective and spoke 2 words that changed everything. Phase 2. Until that moment, humanity had fought a defensive war, strategic, controlled, almost gentle, in a terrible way. They had used traps and withdrawal and economic pressure. They had avoided killing when possible. They had given the Council every chance to stop, to reconsider, to choose peace. That restraint was over. The Terran fleet revealed itself. It came from everywhere. From inside hollowed-out asteroids in deep space. From hidden docks beneath the cloud layers of gas giants. From pockets of compressed space that the Council's scientists did not even know were usable. Ships by the thousands, warships, carriers, fast attack frigates, electronic warfare platforms, all of them built in secret over decades. All of them crewed by men and women who had trained for years for this exact moment. The Council had estimated that humanity possessed perhaps 300 combat-capable vessels. The true number was closer to 6,000. And unlike the Council's fleet, which was a collection of ships from different species with different systems and different languages, the Terran fleet was one thing. One mind. One purpose. Every ship connected through lighthouse, every captain receiving real-time intelligence, every weapon system coordinated by a single strategic network. The counterattack began at dawn, Earth time. Achebe chose dawn on purpose. It meant something to humans. In the first 12 hours, Terran forces disabled the Graxi homeworld's orbital defense grid. They did not destroy it. They sent electronic warfare ships that blinded the grid's sensors and froze its targeting systems, rendering it useless without killing anyone. Simultaneously, fast attack groups captured 2 major Council shipyards in strikes so precise that the defending forces surrendered before they fully understood what was happening. By hour 24, a Terran battle group had arrived at the Throne of Ages itself and established a blockade. The Council's seat of power, the ancient, untouchable center of galactic authority, was surrounded by human warships. And then the fleet stopped. It did not fire. It did not threaten. It simply sat there, silent and patient, like a wall. Toron's surviving fleet, retreating from New Kisumu, found itself cut off. Terran ships appeared on every escape route, closing around the Graxi Armada like fingers forming a fist. The encirclement was complete within hours. Toran's ships were outnumbered, outgunned, and out of options. Achebe sent a message directly to Toran. It was not an ultimatum. It was not a demand. It was an offer. War Marshal Toran, you and your crews have fought with courage. You are now surrounded, and further resistance will result in the unnecessary loss of life, yours and ours. We are offering full and unconditional surrender terms. Your wounded will receive medical care. Your crews will be treated with dignity. You have my word as an officer. Toran sat in his command chair, surrounded by the wreckage of his ambition, and read the message 3 times. Part of him wanted to fight to the death. The Graxi way was to die standing, weapon in hand, roaring defiance at the void. But his crews were exhausted, his ships were broken, and somewhere in the back of his mind, a small voice reminded him that his attack on New Kisumu had not been the act of a warrior. It had been the act of a coward. He accepted the surrender. When Toran was brought aboard the Terran flagship, he expected what any defeated commander in Council space would expect: humiliation, interrogation, and probably a slow death used as a message to others. He was escorted to a room and told to wait. A medic arrived. She was young, human, with steady hands and kind eyes. She treated the wound on his arm, a burn from an exploding console, without speaking. She gave him water. She gave him food, chosen carefully to match Graxi dietary needs. She told him the doctor would check on him in an hour. Then she left. Toran sat alone in the small, clean room and stared at the bandage on his arm. He had killed 8,000 of her people. Civilians. Children. And this woman had treated his wound and brought him food, and spoken to him as if he were a guest, not a monster. He did not understand. In his entire life, in every war he had fought, mercy had never been part of the equation. You won or you lost. You killed or you died. The idea that someone could defeat you completely and then choose to be kind was so foreign to him that it broke something in his chest. The great war marshal of the Graxi Dominion put his face in his hands and wept. On a secure channel, Councillor Jet Mora contacted Ambassador Vasquez. The transmission was private, encrypted, and desperate. You planned all of this, Jet Mora said. The traps, the withdrawal, the hidden fleet. Even this, the way you treat your prisoners. You planned the mercy. Vasquez was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was softer than Jet Mora had ever heard it. The traps were planned. The fleet was planned. The strategy was planned. She paused. The mercy was never part of the plan. That is just who we are. It is who we have always been, even when we forget it. We fight when we must. We win when we can. But we do not become the thing we are fighting against. That is the one line we will not cross. Jet Mora's bioluminescent body flickered in patterns that meant something like wonder, or perhaps grief, or perhaps the slow and painful realization that everything they had believed about the universe was wrong. Far away, on the throne of ages, Archon Vielthus sat in the dark council chamber. The lights had been dimmed to save power. The human-built energy systems were in maintenance mode, of course. Through the viewport, he could see the shapes of Terran warships hanging in the void like silent judges. An aide approached nervously. Archon, the humans have requested a meeting. Ambassador Vasquez wishes to address the council. Vielthus said nothing for a long time. Then, very quietly, in a voice that no longer hummed with power. What are they? The aide did not have an answer. No one did. 1 month after the vote that started the war, Lena Vasquez walked back into the council chamber. The room was different now. The lights were low. Several seats were empty. The 3 species that had already made peace with humanity had withdrawn their representatives. The stone walls, once lit to show off their ancient carvings, were dim and gray. The clouds that used to form near the high ceiling were gone, because the climate systems were running on backup power. It looked like a tomb. And in many ways, it was. Vasquez walked to the center of the floor, the same spot where she had stood a month ago, when 11 voices had laughed at her warning. She was wearing the same dark suit. Her hair was pulled back the same way. She looked exactly as she had before, calm and steady, as if the month between then and now had been a minor inconvenience, rather than the most devastating conflict in galactic history. She carried a single tablet. The remaining counselors watched her approach with expressions that ranged from fear to exhaustion to barely hidden rage. Vieltha sat at the head of the chamber, his crystalline bones dark and clouded. He had aged visibly in 30 days. The hum in his voice was gone. He looked like what he was, an old man, watching everything he had built come undone. Toran's seat was empty. The war marshal was still aboard a human ship, receiving medical care that was better than anything available on his own homeworld. He had not spoken publicly since his surrender. Those who had seen him said he was quiet and thoughtful in a way that the old Toran had never been. Vasquez reached the center and stopped. She looked around the room, meeting the eyes of every counselor present, and then she spoke. 1 month ago, this council voted to go to war with humanity. You believed we were weak. You believed we were young and soft and unprepared. You believed that our kindness was a flaw, our generosity was foolishness, and our patience was fear. She paused. You were wrong about all of it. No one interrupted her this time. No one laughed. I am not here to punish you, she continued. I am not here to demand surrender, because most of you have already surrendered. I am not here to humiliate you, because the last month has done that without my help. I am here to offer you something that I suspect none of you expected. She held up the tablet. A future. She tapped the screen, and the air above the central floor filled with light, not the star maps and fleet positions of a month ago, but something else entirely. Documents, agreements, plans, a framework for something new. These are the terms of the Terran proposal, Vasquez said. I will summarize them. She spoke clearly and slowly, making sure every word was understood. First, the Galactic Hegemony Council is dissolved, permanently. It will not be reformed, restructured, or renamed. It is over. Vielthas flinched, but said nothing. Second, in its place, a new body will be created, the General Assembly of Spacefaring Species. Every species with faster-than-light capability will have one equal vote, not weighted by age, territory, military strength, or economic power. One species, one vote. This includes the 312 minor species that the hegemony has governed without representation for centuries. Murmurs passed through the chamber. 312 species that had been voiceless for thousands of years, suddenly given the same standing as the elder races. It was a revolution, disguised as a policy document. Third, a tribunal will be convened to address the bombardment of New Kisumu. Those responsible for ordering the attack on a civilian population will face justice. This is not negotiable. She let that point settle before continuing. Fourth, humanity will provide full economic reconstruction assistance to every species affected by this conflict. Every species, including those that attacked us. We will send engineers to repair the systems we withdrew from. We will send food to worlds facing shortages. We will send doctors to hospitals that need them. We will do this freely, without conditions, because it is the right thing to do. The Suran ambassador leaned forward. And what do you want in return? Territory? Control of trade routes? A permanent seat of authority? Vasquez looked at her. Nothing. The word hung in the air. Nothing? The ambassador repeated. We do not want your territory. We have enough worlds. We do not want control of your trade. We want to trade fairly with everyone. We do not want special authority in the new assembly. We will have one vote, the same as every other species. We want nothing except what we have always wanted, the right to exist, to grow, and to build. She lowered the tablet. You declared war on us because we made ourselves essential. Archon Vielthas said that was dangerous, and he was right. Any species that makes itself the foundation of galactic civilization holds a kind of power that is hard to check. We understand that fear. She looked directly at Vielthas. But you were afraid for the wrong reason. You thought we wanted to rule. You thought our goal was to make you dependent so we could control you. That was never the plan. The plan, if you can call it that, was simply to be useful. To build things that worked. To help where help was needed. That is not a strategy for domination. It is just how humans are. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was quieter. We do not want to rule you. We want to outgrow the idea that anyone should rule anyone. That is what the assembly represents. Not human power, shared power. Not our vision of the future, everyone's vision, built together. For a long time, no one spoke. The chamber was silent, except for the low hum of backup generators and the distant, almost imaginary sound of human warships holding position outside. Then, one by one, the counselors began to respond. The Suran ambassador was first. She stood, clicked her beak twice the sound that meant agreement, and pressed her mark on the tablet when it was passed to her. The Ul-Thanari delegate followed, then the Menish, then species after species, some reluctantly, some with visible relief, as if a weight they had carried for centuries was finally being set down. Vielthus was last. He sat in his great chair and stared at the tablet that had been placed before him. His hands rested on the arms of the seat, the same seat that Drelith archons had occupied for 4,000 years. The carvings on the stone told the history of his people, stretching back to an age when humans were still living in caves and painting on walls. "If I refuse?" he asked. His voice was thin. Vasquez answered gently. "Then the assembly forms without you, and the Drelith remain welcome to join whenever they are ready. We will not force you. We will not punish you. But the galaxy is moving forward, Archon. You can move with it, or watch it go." Vielthus looked at the tablet for a very long time. Then he looked at the empty seats around him, the allies who had already left, the coalition that had already crumbled, the empire of tradition and fear that had held together only because no one had ever offered a better option. He did not sign. He stood up, slowly and painfully, and walked out of the chamber without a word. The great doors closed behind him, and the sound echoed through the room like the last beat of an ancient heart. Vasquez watched him go. She did not call after him. She did not send anyone to follow. She simply nodded, picked up the tablet, and turned to the remaining counselors. "The assembly will convene in 30 days, she said. "There is much work to do." In the weeks that followed, the galaxy began to change. Human engineers returned to the worlds that needed them. Supply lines reopened. Hospitals restaffed. Communication networks came back online. The damage was real, and recovery would take years, but it began almost immediately because humans did not wait to be asked to help. They simply showed up and started working. The General Assembly held its first session on a new station, built in neutral space. 341 species sent delegates. Many of them had never had a voice in galactic affairs before. Some had never even been acknowledged by the hegemony. They sat in a circular chamber, with no elevated seats, no thrones, no ancient carvings declaring the superiority of one species over another. Every chair was the same height. Councillor Jetmora, now Delegate Jetmora, attended as the Velkari representative. After the session, they recorded a message for the Hive Mind network back home. It was a long message, full of data and analysis, but it ended with something personal. "We called them children," Jetmora said. "We looked at their short history, and their small bodies, and their brief lives, and we decided they were young and foolish, and beneath our concern. We were wrong. They were not young, they were new. And the new do not owe reverence to the old. They do not owe obedience to tradition. They owe only the future, and they pay that debt every day, simply by building it." Jetmora paused, their body glowing softly. "I have lived among ancient species my entire life. I have seen civilizations that measure their history in tens of thousands of years. None of them frighten me. But the humans, who measure their star-faring history in mere centuries, they fill me with something I have never felt before. I think the word, in their language, is hope." On the colony world of New Kisumu, construction crews cleared the last of the rubble from the bombardment. The crater where the main settlement had been was being transformed into a memorial garden. Around it, new buildings were rising: homes, schools, a medical center. The workers came from 14 different species. Some of them had been enemies a month ago. Now they carried beams and mixed concrete side by side, and in the evenings they shared meals and taught each other songs, and tried to pronounce each other's names correctly. A Terran news network ran a short segment about it. The anchor read the report in the same calm, professional tone used for weather updates and traffic advisories. The General Assembly convened today for its first full session, with representatives from 341 species in attendance. In other news, the colony of Nuki Sumu has begun rebuilding. Volunteers from 14 species have arrived to assist with construction. The new memorial garden is expected to open next spring. Then the anchor moved on to the next story, because for humans, rebuilding after disaster was not remarkable. It was not heroic. It was not special. It was just what they did. In the empty council chamber on the throne of ages, the lights had gone out completely. The ancient carvings on the walls were invisible in the darkness. The 12 great seats stood empty and would stand empty forever. Somewhere in the station, in a small room with a viewport facing the stars, Archon Vialthus sat alone. He watched the human ships departing one by one, their engines leaving trails of blue light against the blackness. They were leaving. They had won, and they were leaving. They had not claimed the station. They had not torn down the carvings. They had not even changed the locks. They had simply made it irrelevant. Vialthus sat in the dark and watched the lights disappear, one by one, until the only things left were the stars. The old universe was gone. The new one had already begun.